Hey, this is Dan from LearningCameras.com, and Nikon has just announced the new D610. Now, this camera is still on the line right now with the Nikon D600. There are a lot of discounts to be had on the Nikon D600, so hit up my website, LearningCameras.com. We'll be posting a lot of those. There's some great refurbished deals. Now, let's give a little bit of background here. The Nikon D600, an excellent camera, great dynamic range. There were a couple weaknesses when it came to video, but for photos, it was unbelievable. I had the camera for about a month, and I began seeing some issues. I had a couple blown pixels actually, but that's a little bit more rare. What I was seeing is dust creeping onto the sensor from the shutter mechanism without even changing the lenses. So this is without even taking off the lens, which is typically when you would get dust on that. But even after a couple days, I was beginning to see dust on the sensor. And then oil began to spill on the sensor also from that shutter mechanism. So even after a good cleaning, the problem came back. I'm not going to be cleaning my cameras out every 2 weeks to a month, so I went ahead and returned the camera. Now later we did find out that this was a very widespread issue. A lot of people had complaints with dust and oil getting on the sensor. Some were horrible. I mean, you can really just see it taking over the sensor on that. So it's very visible inside the pictures to the degree that Nikon allowed it into the shutter. So we were wondering if Nikon would actually admit that there's a problem, replace the camera, or just replace the shutter mechanism, order a recall, something like that. So far we had heard nothing from Nikon on the D600. In fact, I spoke to them on the phone yesterday after the Nikon D610 announcement and asked them if anything was being done on the D600. And they said no, we were just sending them out for cleanings. If you have dust and oil on the sensor, we'll go ahead and clean it for you and send it back to you. I'm not sure if they'll still do that for free after you're outside of the warranty, so probably not. Would be my guess on that until they acknowledge that there is a problem. So beware on that. I guess not everyone has complained about this issue, so there might be exceptions to that. Nikon has not quite said that they have completely fixed the problem, but the fact that they are releasing now a Nikon D610 might give us a hint into what's happening. So let's take a look at what's new on the Nikon D610. Not a lot. It's going to feel almost exactly like the Nikon D600. So if you want to actually get a good representation of how the Nikon D610 is going to perform, check out our Nikon D600 review, and you'll see some of those great dynamic ranges. We put it up against a Canon 5D Mark III and some other cameras as well, just to see how it performs. Excellent camera on that. So take a look at our review on that and you'll get a good impression. So what is new? Well, we have a new shutter mechanism, and the new shutter ups the frame rate from 5.5 to 6. Not a whole lot of improvement there. So basically the same thing other than a tiny number jump. You're going to notice just about the same on that. Now we do have a new silent shutter. Now this is something that the 5D3 has, and it's very, very good on the 5D3. When I'm at a wedding, I almost exclusively use it. You can hardly hear that the shutter is going off, and you're still able to get about 4 frames a second shooting on it. Not quite as much as you would get in the high-speed mode, but it is very quiet. Now, other cameras have said they've had the quiet shutter, but it really hasn't been quiet. So Nikon is touting this right now. However, we have not heard it yet. Nikon isn't allowing the D610 to even be powered on at this point in time. And so we don't really know exactly how it's going to perform, if it's going to be like the 5D Mark III or more like other cameras, which is just kind of a slower version of a shutter. Now, this will reduce your frame rate to about 3 frames a second, but for most cases, that's going to be fine if Nikon can pull it off with a silent shutter. Now, they're not really saying a lot of other things about the shutter mechanism, except that it's brand new. They're making it very clear that this is a new shutter mechanism. So hopefully to try to tell people that they have fixed all the issues, that this shutter mechanism is going to be great going forward. Now, the only other adjustment that we're seeing really on the Nikon D610, which doesn't roll off the tongue as nicely as the D600, is that they've made some tuning to the auto white balance. Now, I did do a test on this when I had the Nikon D600, and it was very weak in low light. However, you should be shooting raw, and if you're shooting raw, you should have no issues altering that white balance in post. So not a big deal for me. So that's really the only improvement that we're seeing on the Nikon D600. Now the starting price is just under $2,000 at about $19.99, $19.96. We have some pre-order links if you want to take a look at them at learningcameras.com, and you can buy those cameras or reserve those cameras. So the Nikon D600 should be what the Nikon D610 should be what the D600 should have been. It's basically a quality controlled Nikon D600. It is really the best way of putting it. Now, there is one little thing in there, and if you follow us on Twitter, I'll update you when I find this out at Learning Cameras. And that is that they did mention a couple times about manual aperture control in video. This was a weakness on the Nikon D600, that if you were shooting in live view, you could not adjust the aperture. So maybe Nikon has actually fixed this in this camera. That would actually be a huge thing for me. And for videographers now, I would highly recommend the Nikon D610 if they have fixed this. So we'll go ahead and send out a tweet or something like that, and we'll update it on the website too if they have released this feature, but we're not really sure for now. So for now, all we know for sure is a new shutter mechanism and the small changes in white balance. So now, should you get this camera? Well, if you were looking at the Nikon D600 before and you were worried about some of the issues that it might have, now's a great time to get it. Yes, you do have the Canon 6D that's out, but really the 6D is a little bit of a different breed of camera. I think it conforms more to a consumer market than the Nikon D600. I do prefer the 6D for video, but only because of that aperture issue I've been having with the Nikon D600, where it will not change it in live view. If Nikon does fix that, I would now recommend the Nikon D600 for video. So, you know, it's actually $100 less than the Nikon D600 started for, so that's a good reason to jump on it. I mean, less than $2,000. It's an excellent camera. It should be a very, very quality controlled camera. You should be getting all the specs and the performance of a Nikon D600, and we'll stay tuned on some of those other little things that we don't know about this camera yet, and hopefully Nikon is able to deliver on this in the way that the Nikon D600 should have. So hit up my website, learningcameras.com. You can follow us at Twitter at Learning Cameras, and we'll go ahead and post links to these cameras where you can purchase them. We are posting deals on the Nikon D600, so anytime we run across a nice deal, especially in some of those refurbished models, I've seen them as low as $1,500 for now, and that's an unbelievable price for such a great camera. So you can also keep that in mind, and you know, we'll see on this camera. But if you owned a Nikon D600, I feel very sorry for you if you still have that. The prices are dropping like crazy. Nobody is really going to want one. You're going to have to really put a low offer on it, about $1,400 used maybe, just to get rid of it, if you wanted the Nikon D610. So I called Nikon. They really didn't have anything to say to me on the Nikon D600. I told them about the issues that we were having on those cameras, which I had myself on mine. So, you know, I might buy the Nikon D610 now that they fixed that issue. It really was a good camera. I don't know if I need it so much now. For video now, I've gone with the the Canon D7, the 70D, and that's a great camera now for video. So I don't find myself needing the Nikon D600 quite as much as I did when I originally bought it. So, but it's a great buy, great camera, unbelievable performance. Check out our review again for the full performance and images from the Nikon D600.